welcome to Procurement Pivots, the podcast for procurement professionals wanting to navigate change successfully and create career success on your own terms. I'm Donna Bowden, Procurement Career Coach and founder of Narrate Your Career.
And I'm Laura Sellers, Executive Coach for Procurement and founder of Coaching for Procurement. And between us, we bring almost 25 years of supporting and working with procurement professionals. And it's fair to say we've navigated many of our own career pivots along the way. And now we're here to help you do the same.
Each episode will share practical strategies, honest conversations, and expert insights to help you confidently tackle the changes and challenges in your procurement career.
Let's get started. Hi everyone, and welcome to our first official episode of the Procurement Pivots podcast, where we're going to be talking through the element of positioning yourself. So we're hoping to share with you some context around what that means, why you need to do it, and some actionable takeaways as well. So what are your thoughts on this, Donna?
Well, I think firstly, I think we both agreed that positioning comes up in our conversations with clients really frequently. And actually that's often the very reason that our clients are coming to us to really look at how they are setting themselves up for success for whatever's next and wherever they're looking to get to. So it felt like a really important topic that we wanted to kind of bring and just discuss in this environment, because we know that, you know, when you get your positioning right, it can be so impactful, and it really can. It can be quite transformational, I think, within your career. So, yeah, it was a really important topic for us.
Yeah, that's such a great point. Like you say, the ripple effects of doing it strategically, intentionally can be really valuable. And it's like that thing about the action you take today is for your future procurement self, the future point of your career. So it is really worth giving some thought. But because we know how demanding a procurement role can be, it's not always easy to give yourself that space, give yourself the time to talk through it. So we're going to just sort of break that down a bit, aren't we, in today's episode?
Yeah.
So
no, I was just going to say as well, I think, the positioning, like, this isn't just about making an external move. I think positioning it's really important to consider, no matter what part of your career journey you're in. And I think, a lot of what we're going to be talking about today, this is relevant for your internal positioning as well as your external positioning. And I think it's it's almost a constant, really. If you want to keep growing, and I know many of you are joining this podcast because you are keen on continuing with that growth journey in your career, like actually how you position yourself on a daily basis actually can just make the biggest of difference.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you say, that constant thing, it is like a muscle you need to exercise, because actually this lends itself really well to strategic thinking. We both of us, again, we have these conversations with clients and just in general with our network about how to move from that operational thinking to strategic thinking. And that can feel like a big step change in itself. So think of it as a muscle to keep exercising and keep practicing in our day-to-day role. And like you say, it's not just about when you're ready to make a move. It's not just about that. It's about just making sure that when you're in the day-to-day and you're working through your career, that you are being intentional and you've got your eyes open to actually how what you're doing can help you to position yourself for the next step when you're ready for it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So lots of stuff to go out there. So where would you suggest that somebody started with this?
I think for me, a really important start point is really to figure out, like, where is it that you actually want to get to? Positioning for me, like you say, it's strategic, it's intentional. You can be really considered with your actions and your behaviours and your decisions to help you to get to achieve your goal. But if you don't know what that destination is, it kind of it can be really difficult to actually kind of make those moves. And I think we've both said, actually, like, it feels at the moment that it's harder to grow in your career right now. In previous times, companies were spending much more money on their internal L&D, their learning and developments. There was more internal kind of support to help you make that next move. There were many more opportunities. Even to get a promotion internally now is much harder than it has been at previous points. And so actually you just need to work smarter, I think, to set yourself up for success, to achieve those goals. But going back to your point of what is the start point, if you don't know where you want to get to, you're probably not going to get there. So I think for me, the start point is really creating that space for yourself to think about what's most important to you, what's most important to you now, but actually, what do you want your life to look like, and how do you want your career to fit in with it as the years go on? So yeah, for me, that would be the start point. What do you think, Laura?
Yeah, I mean, I think something that through learning to coach around starting with the end in mind, when somebody comes to work with me, there's always a conversation around the goal setting, but sometimes the path that we think we need to take
Yeah,
is the thing that does end up adjusting. So you start with the end in mind, but how we get there might look quite different, because we go deeper into, like you say, looking at what that means, because you might have a long-term goal. So it's like, oh, what do I do in the meantime? How can I sort of make intentional decisions or
yeah,
moves or have intentional conversations to help me get there? So definitely there's that element of starting with the end in mind. And just to pick up with what you said as well, a couple of things actually, is that the first thing is around deciding, who do I want to be? What do I want my life to look
yeah,
like? Because we probably reach certain stages of our lives and our careers where that does look different.
yeah,
So you might still be really career driven, but your version of success feels very different. It looks
mm,
very different. And sometimes it might have been before based on job titles, based on moving up the ladder. It might have been based on a level of income that you want to get, and then something might happen outside in your day-to-day life, or you may go through a transition where you expand your family, as an example, or something else happens and it just completely shifts what that
yeah,
means. So not only do you need to really think about what the goal is, but just like you said, there's that thing about who do I want to
yeah,
be, not only do I want to do, where do I want to go? So I think the art of this positioning is taking into account several strands to help you get there from that A to B, like you were talking about.
yeah,
So who do I want to be? What do I want to do? Where do I want to go? They all support each
yeah.
other.
And it's very much what do you want rather than what you feel you should want. Like you
Oh,
mentioned the word should, and again, I think that comes up a lot with my conversations with clients. They're like, well, surely I should. And it's like, actually, what do you want? That's much
yeah.
more important. I mean, is it worth us mentioning some of the individual things that we would look at with clients to help a client get to that kind of, that decision about what right might look like for them in the future?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Like I say, that there is the element of goal setting, the way that I break it down with my clients. And we don't always do it in the first session, by the way. It depends on
Yeah,
where they're at. Sometimes the goal becomes a little bit clearer once we've got into the depth of what's going on for them at the moment. So I'm not always rigid with the goal being the first
yeah,
thing, if I'm
yeah,
honest. And I don't want to contradict myself when I say about starting with the end in mind. The way I sort of describe it to my clients is around you throwing all the pieces of the jigsaw puzzle out there, and we're sort of putting it back together in a way. So I think while I have the element of goal setting, which is really important for me, there's also this thing about what's going on, what's led them to get to this dilemma or this opportunity or this challenge for positioning themselves. What's going on? So I think that for me is really important, because sometimes we can be so future
Yeah,
focused on the next thing, on the next thing, we're ignoring what's going on, and sometimes there are patterns there.
yeah,
So yeah, that's definitely something that I would encourage
yeah.
exploring as well when you are looking at that A to B move.
Yeah, and I think that's a really valid point. When I look at a lot of my clients, whilst they'll have their goals for working with me, the goal won't necessarily be defined at the beginning. And that's often what we're working on, is helping them to get to that point where they're making those really big decisions about potential pivots or changes in their career. You know, it might be, do I stay in the current role, move up? Do I move out into the business? Do I change industry? Do I set up on my own? Like, weighing up all these options. So they don't at the beginning yet know what the goal is, but we're working together to look at things like their values, their strengths, their passions, their purpose, you know, a combination of all of these different pieces of the jigsaw to then get to the point of actually understanding where do they genuinely want to get to. So yeah, it's not always a straightforward process, is it, to get to that point?
It's not at all. And just what you were saying about passions and about their strengths and about their values. Values are a really core part of working with a
Yeah,
coach for me. I think it's because, when do you really take that time? Like we've just said, you've got to be intentional.
yeah,
When do you take that time to really explore what matters to you? And what I think is really important is to understand, no matter which stage of your career you're at, if you're up at that senior level or if you're at the start, I think it's really important to look back a little bit, because success leaves clues.
yeah,
I say this all the time.
yeah,
Success leaves clues. Your values leave clues. And so when it comes to those strengths and the successes, it's about taking into consideration all those things. Like, it's not like you don't already have the answers. We're just discovering and exploring those answers that already
yeah,
exist, and making sure we're putting them intentionally into that goal.
yeah,
So yeah, that's a really important aspect for me,
yeah.
I think.
So once someone is kind of more aware of what their goal is, um,
Hmm.
how how do you think someone can then position themselves in order to achieve that goal?
Mm. I mean, I talked earlier about a muscle, about strengthening this positioning, but I also say curiosity is a muscle.
Mm,
Curiosity is that we need to keep strengthening. So sometimes it's about being open to opportunities or positions that we might not have already explored. So in terms of positioning, where to start, I think, and I fall into this trap, right, all the time, and I'm much better at it now than I was, is that thing about you don't have to do it on your own.
yeah,
And I'm not just talking about doing it with a coach. While we both have, our own businesses, sometimes it's just about having that honest conversation with
mm,
somebody. So I if you don't mind, I'll share one of my own examples for myself. When I decided it was time for me to leave corporate, I'd always had this dream of doing this thing for myself, and running my own business. And I have many reasons for why that was the time for me to do it, due to family
yeah,
circumstances, personal circumstances. But I remember very clearly sitting on the sofa, just literally slumping down, and just saying to my husband, he sort of said, what's going on? And I said, oh, I've still got that dream. And he went, I know you have. When are you going to do it?
yeah,
And I think, and the fact that it was like a weight off my shoulders, because leaving a relatively, I would call a successful
yeah,
career. I don't know why I would use the word relatively, success. It did feel successful to me. I was in a really good position, but I think I just had this scratch,
yeah,
this itch that I needed to scratch, and so even just to talk it out with somebody.
yeah,
So while I think a coach is a brilliant person to do that with, sometimes the initial conversations is around sharing it with someone that you
yeah,
trust.
yeah. And
Yeah.
I think that's the key thing, someone you trust. I
Yeah.
think it's really important. Like, it's really great to, have the ability to talk about these things, but just choose carefully who you share that with, I would say. And you want it to be someone that actually understands the implication of what they're saying. Um, you know, Many people get the wrong advice from the wrong people, and so I think it's like, share, be open, but choose wisely would be my advice.
You see, that is a really good point. So I went into the element of sharing with a family member, with my husband. But I think if, like I say, there are other people who want the best for you, right? But they don't always know what that best for you
Mm,
is, because you might, like you've said before, you might not have had that conversation before. And also, if it is internally, you want to have that conversation internally, other people have also got their own goals and their own needs and things. So while, you have an element of trust, this is where a coach does come in
yeah,
well, actually, because it is that external sounding board. So someone who also can help guide you without having
yeah,
motives to keep you in an organization, without having motives to keep you in their team, because they know how good you are and they want to keep
yeah,
you. So I think definitely that element of being intentional, again,
yeah.
positioning yourself with the right person. So there are definitely many aspects to that and many strands to it, but I think sharing it is definitely an important point.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, great point. And I think it's just, once we become clear on where we want to get to, like, it's not going to be overnight. And I think for me, kind of, it's again same words, but just be intentional with those decisions and really think about what are those things that you can do that are going to help you to get to that goal, and actually what are those smaller steps that will help you get there, and who are the people, like you say, who could support you, who could influence the decision, who could kind of cheerlead you to get to that point. But actually, how are you showing up and how are you communicating yourself and showing your value for where you want to get to, not necessarily where you are right now. And sometimes, our goal is taking us to a different place, a different industry, a different level of position. And actually, I think going back to your point, kind of how we act and behave today, it's going to set the tone for our future. And so it's kind of really, behaving intentionally for where it is you want to get to, so that you're already being recognised for that thing, whatever that thing may be.
See, that is such a good point as well, because especially if you're debating a big transition, you're wanting to position yourself for, let's say it's a
Yeah,
promotion or a change in role, whether it's an internal move or an external. Like we've said, there are synergies here, and it's not always about an external move. But sometimes when we're reflecting on that big transition, it can feel overwhelming, right? Or, we go back to the example of a New Year's
yeah.
resolution. Yeah, new year, new me, do this, I'm going to do that. And I think I actually posted on LinkedIn about this year, about, it's not about being a new you. It's about making sure that the changes you want to make, the positioning you want to do, is
Yeah,
sustainable. And so when we say it's about being intentional and taking the steps today that you want to be true for you in a few months' time, it's also got to be a point where it's sustainable, because sometimes we try a big change too soon and then we don't last, and we can take that personally and think, oh well, I'm never going to get there,
yeah,
you know. And that could also be like if you're thinking externally, a scattergun approach to applying for roles, right? Without being intentional, you get a few rejections, you get ghosted, and then that can damage your self-esteem. Internally, that could look like reaching out for conversations for, or wanting to position yourself, or going for internal promotions, and you keep getting rejected. And so it's about making sure that you're not just putting all your eggs in one
yeah,
basket in terms of that big change. It's about really breaking it
yeah.
down, aligning it with who you are, and making sure that you're celebrating those little successes along the way as well.
Yeah, I was going to come to that actually. I think it's not just celebrating achieving the goal. Like, it's, really, like, you need to be kind to yourself and you need to recognize the small wins along the way, and actually enjoy the progress and enjoy the process. Like, actually, you don't want to live your life like always trying to get to this point in the future. Like, we need to live our lives as presently as we possibly can. And so it's, recognize what's going well, recognize and acknowledge what hasn't gone well. But I think it's just giving yourself that space to reflect, you know, how am I progressing against those actions and those steps, and just be really kind to yourself and give yourself a pat on the back, like when you've done those things that you've intentionally set out to do. Like, be proud of that, like, you know, you're doing really well, so recognize it.
Oh, that is such a good point. And I like to really embrace what some people might call failure, right? What is it? Fail stands for first attempt in
Yeah,
learning or something like that. Is that actually it's all feedback.
yeah,
So, and like you say, there is that embracing of the journey. If you're wanting to make this transition, the the beauty is in the climb, I think they say. You talk about Olympians and
yeah,
athletes, reaching the very epitome, the very top of their profession, and missing that element of fulfillment or satisfaction. It can be very much likened to what it's like in a career. You might get to that place, you might get to that position, and it still doesn't feel like, oh, I've still
yeah,
not, got to where I am. And that's where, referring back to earlier on in the episode, where we've talked about making sure the goal aligns with who you are, your strengths, your passions, so it really does leave clues. So there is a very much a holistic way of looking at that positioning.
yeah,
It's not just about the end goal. So there's so much to go
yeah.
at here. I think we could talk here for hours, I think.
But I think also
But
with the job market, you know, obviously a lot of the people that I'm talking to, it's about supporting them with making those, you know, those big job moves. And successful strategic positioning can very much replace job applications. Like, the frustrations, the overwhelm at the moment, like, you know, look at LinkedIn for like 5 minutes and there's always stories about, oh, I'm applying for all these roles and I'm not hearing back, I'm not getting feedback. Like, actually, some people are securing their roles through strategic positioning. They are not applying for job advertisements. And I'm certainly not going to say to people, don't apply for live jobs that you like the look of. But actually, there is another way to keep moving forward in your career, which doesn't involve applying for live advertised roles. And it's more
yeah,
enjoyable,
that's
to be honest.
yeah. Yeah, and I think, and it is about reframing how you view that challenge, right? And how you view that opportunity. Because like you say, the thought of even applying can be really hard. But even on an internal perspective, so let's say it's not about applying for a job, and this is just about being seen, being visible within your organization and reaching out to the right people. In terms of my own experience, like officially, I don't think I ever had an officially designated mentor, but I had people that I could go to and ask for
Yeah,
advice about, I want to do this, I want to do that. This doesn't feel quite right. So it's also about putting yourself in opportunities in the organization. So that might look like going in and getting involved in a project that's a bit
yeah,
different, which can also feel like a real stretch for some people, depending on what they've got going on. Or it's just about learning about other
yeah,
categories. And yeah, it looks different for everybody. So I think, we want to really, this is our first episode. There will probably be a lot of crossover with some of these elements where we go into them in more depth and detail. But certainly when it comes to positioning, there is that element of being strategic, being open to other opportunities, being curious about
yeah,
other ways of getting you to the goal. Because sometimes we think the only way is the way that we already know, and it's not.
yeah, yeah. So, what are our takeaways from episode 1 then?
Well, gosh, I think, we did try and do a bit of a plan before this, and I know a few things have come in that we didn't plan for. So that's the beauty
Yeah,
of a podcast episode for me. There's so many different elements to this, but I think certainly from a takeaway is that constant positioning. It's not just about a big transition to a new role
yeah,
or to a promotion. It's about positioning and being strategic on the day to day, strengthening that muscle of positioning.
yeah. And I think it's also just becoming clear and having clarity around what the right goals are for you, what are the ones that actually matter, not the goals you think you should have, but the goals that you actually want for yourself, not for the company, but to help you live the life you want and create the career that you dream of, really.
Yeah, absolutely. There's so much in that around making sure that the goal is yours, that you own it, that you're accountable for it. And when I say that, obviously you're not the decision maker of giving the role or giving the promotion internally or whatever that transition is, but making sure that you are accountable for the actions that you take
Yeah,
with regards to that. So that, yeah, there's definitely so much
yeah,
in there. And I think, the other thing is around that we've touched upon is the breaking it down, right? Because it can feel overwhelming. It leads to feelings of being stuck. So it's about making sure that you break down this goal into actionable milestones, but also learning and tweaking as we go, being very agile, being very adaptable to those little micro decisions that lead up to a bigger
yeah.
goal.
And just being kind to yourself and recognizing the progress and enjoying the process. Like, don't just live for this end goal. Don't just celebrate the end goal. Like, just really, recognize those smaller steps and where they have gone well as well.
Brilliant. Well, there we go, Donna. That is number one on positioning. So we would love to hear feedback
Yeah.
from you all about what's useful, what you'd like to know more of. Is there something that we've said in an episode where you'd like us to delve a bit deeper in? But like we've said, we have plenty of content, but we are really interested in hearing from you about what you'd like to hear more of. So we hope to see you or hope for you to hear us in the next episode.
Yeah. Thanks so much. Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for tuning in to Procurement Pivots. We hope today's episode gave you actionable tips to help you to continue to move forward in your procurement career.
If you enjoyed the conversation, follow our episodes, share them with others, and please support us on our social media channels for others that might be interested to tune in.